So, 2025 is going to introduce us to many new rookies, these being Ollie Bearman, Kimi Antonelli, Liam Lawson, Jack Doohan, Gabriel Bortoleto and Isaac Hadjar. Most of these drivers have had really successful junior careers. Fans and teams are expecting big things from all of them. Kimi Antonelli and Liam Lawson are both being thrown straight into the deep end driving for Mercedes and Red Bull. The last time we saw a rookie driver drive for one of the top teams was Lewis Hamilton in 2007. And to show just how young the current F1 grid is, if Hamilton and Alonso were to retire at the end of this season, then Carlos Sainz, who is only 30 and is only going into his 10th year in F1, would be the oldest driver on the grid. So here's what to expect from each rookie in 2020. So we start things off with Ollie Bearman. Now, Bearman's already made a name for himself in F1, thanks to Saudi Arabia last year, Baku and Brazil, and although Brazil wasn't his best performance, he still showed great potential. He managed to score points with Ferrari in Saudi Arabia, and I think he outqualified Hülkenberg in Baku as well. Bearman had two really strong seasons in Formula 2, picking up a lot of wins along the way. In his first season, he became the only ever F2 driver to top every single session, this being practice, the sprint race, qualifying and the race itself, which is actually quite impressive because to top every single session in F2 is pretty harder than it is to top every single session in F1, mainly because of the sprint race being a reverse grid. So Ollie obviously had to come through the field to do that, and then to win the feature race as well on the same weekend. It shows he's a good driver, he's got great potential and a really bright future in F1. He also picked up feature race wins in Barcelona and Spa. Now, I think Bearman could be a future contender for the Ferrari seat because Hamilton's getting quite old now. I don't think he'll be at Ferrari for over 4 seasons at most. If Hamilton's at Ferrari for at least 2 seasons, this will give Bearman time to adapt to F1, improve on what he's already good at, improve on his weaknesses, and 2 seasons gives him a chance to prove himself even more to Ferrari. I think Ferrari obviously rate him very highly, otherwise they wouldn't have put him in the car in Saudi Arabia last season, and obviously they wouldn't have taken him on in their young driver program. But then do remember Lance Stroll used to be in that driver program as well. Moving on to Kimi Antonelli. Now, Kimi Antonelli had a really quick junior career and he is still only 18 years old, which by the way makes me feel really old and I'm only 20. To know there is an F1 driver who is now younger than me actually feels scary. Antonelli's junior career was very successful. In 2022 he won the Italian Formula 4 Championship. Going into 2023 he competed in the European Formula Regional Championship and also won that, along the way attracting interest from Toto Wolff and Mercedes. And now in 2025 he's already in that Mercedes car. In 2024 he jumped straight into F2, had a few impressive races. Overall as a season it didn't go the best for him, but I feel like that's more because Prama's car wasn't as good as it should have been. He's coming into Mercedes, replacing arguably the greatest driver of all time, Lewis Hamilton. Now, that's some very big shoes to fill, especially for Antonelli, who is just 18 years old. As I've said in my predictions video, I am a bit concerned for Antonelli going straight into a top team like Mercedes. We've seen before rookies can go into a big top team and perform well. We saw it with Oscar Piastri and we saw it with Lewis Hamilton in 2007. But we've also seen when it can go wrong for rookies competing straight into Formula 1 when they've only had 1 season in F2. We saw this with Logan Sargent. Now, Williams did give him a chance, but he never proved himself, never really lived up to his potential. Now, I think Antonelli's probably a better driver than Logan Sargent was, but there's still that risk he could maybe go down the same route as him. We also saw when Yuki Tsunoda came into F1 in 2021, after only having 1 season in F2, there's a lot of hype around Tsunoda. People are arguing he could be the next big thing, and he still could be because he's improved a lot now, but it took him a lot of time to get there, and the same could happen for Kimi Antonelli. However, I do see the potential in Antonelli, otherwise I don't think Toto Wolff would have picked him up, because to impress Toto Wolff you have got to be a good driver. And to be at such a young age to impress Toto Wolff as well, you can only be one of the next best things. Now, I think Toto Wolff sees Antonelli as the next Verstappen, how Red Bull saw the potential in Verstappen, put him straight into the Toro Rosso car, and then as soon as they had the chance to put Verstappen into the big Red Bull car, they put him in there, and he was very impressive. It took him a few seasons to get to the top and start consistently winning races, but he eventually got there, and I think Toto Wolff sees the same potential in Kimi Antonelli. Liam Lawson is another rookie going into one of the big teams in 2025. I actually don't think I've ever seen it before where we've seen two rookies going into a big team in the same season. It will be interesting to see how that plans out for Antonelli and Liam Lawson. My concern with Lawson is the fact he's going into the second Red Bull seat, and obviously people have been saying since he came in 2023, Lawson should be in that car instead of Perez, and it's finally happened. But we've also seen at the same time, that second Red Bull seat, it's like a poison chalice. Pierre Gasly really struggled in 2019. Red Bull kicked him out halfway through the season, put him back to Toro Rosso. Then we saw Alex Albon have his turn in that second Red Bull seat, and I actually thought he was really impressive. And then 2020 started, and Verstappen obliterated him. Albon was nowhere near him. I think he was an average of 6/10 off him in each qualifying session. He always seemed to get knocked out in Q1 or Q2, and then Red Bull replaced Albon with Perez. Now, Perez started off really well in Red Bull. He picked up a few wins. He got a win in Baku. He helped Verstappen in the final race to win the championship by holding Hamilton up halfway through the race. And then the end of 2023 and all of 2024 came for Perez, and that was the downfall of his Red Bull career. He always struggled to get a podium at the end of 2023, and then 2024, consistent Q1 and Q2 exits, which as a Red Bull driver is not good enough. He had an average finishing position of P10, and it probably cost Red Bull the Constructors last season as well. Red Bull obviously see a lot of potential in Liam Lawson, like Mercedes do with Kimi Antonelli, and we've seen in recent years as well, Verstappen's not even planning on staying in F1 for that much longer. He doesn't really care about breaking records, so he says anyway. So I think Red Bull could see Lawson as their next main driver, so they might be a bit more lenient with him than they have been with other second drivers in recent seasons. Lawson was that impressive in 2023 that when he replaced Ricciardo, some fans were screaming for him to have a permanent seat and were actually disappointed he didn't have one in 2024. Lawson had a really impressive junior career. Obviously, he got picked up by the Red Bull Young Driver Programme. He made his single-seater debut all the way back in 2015, which is 10 years ago now. That's such a long time. He competed in F2, finished third, and he also competed in Super Formula. I think Lawson can be that driver who breaks the Red Bull second driver curse. Hopefully he will be, because I do see the potential in Lawson. I don't think he lived up to the potential quite as much in 2024 when he replaced Ricciardo. I don't think he was as impressive in 2024 than he was in 2023. He didn't really beat Tsunoda at all, they were quite equal. But then I think people were expecting a bit more from Lawson because of how impressive he was in 2023. So we can only wait and see how this season's going to go for him. Hopefully Red Bull aren't going to be toxic like they usually are towards their second driver. And if they're not, then Lawson will have a good season. And you never know, he could even pick up a few wins. Let's move on to Isaac Hadjar now. Hadjar could have won Formula 2 last season until he stalled the car on the grid in the final race in Abu Dhabi, basically gifting Gabriel Bortoleto the championship. Before Formula 2, he competed in French F4 and Formula 3. He joined the Red Bull Academy in 2022 when he finished 4th in the F3 season. We also saw him in that one practice session at Silverstone last season where he almost killed Lando Norris, but the less we say about that, the better. Now, I don't know that much about Isaac Hadjar because I've not really been following Formula 2 or Formula 3 in recent years, but I do think he does deserve his shot in F1, mainly because he was the front runner in F2 last season, beating Antonelli and Ollie Behrman, and nearly beating Gabriel Bortoleto. Obviously, if Perez wasn't so bad in 2024, then he probably wouldn't be in a car this season, and Lawson would be in that Racing Bull instead, and Perez would obviously still be at Red Bull. But chances don't come very often in F1, and he's got a lot to prove this season. As I said with Lawson, we know how toxic Red Bull can be, so you've got to impress as a Red Bull driver or as a Racing Bull driver. If you can get anywhere near Tsunoda, I think that's a good season for him. If he doesn't, Red Bull might start looking for other drivers, but we'll see how it goes with Hadjar. As I've said, I don't really know too much about Hadjar because I've not been following the younger categories in recent years, but we'll see how it goes with him, and let's move on to our next driver. Gabriel Bortoleto is the first Brazilian driver we've seen on the grid since Felipe Massa, in a full-time role anyway. I think it's brilliant to see a Brazilian driver back on the grid. It's a country that's got so much history in F1, with legends such as Ayrton Senna, Felipe Massa, Emerson Fittipaldi and Nelson Piquet. Yeah, that's him. Yeah, let's not talk about him. He was part of the McLaren Young Driver Programme and won Formula 2 last season. I don't think Sauber will be amazing this season. I think they're going to be just as bad as they were last season. They really struggled to pick up points. I think having Hulkenberg on board will be good for Bortoleto because he'll be working alongside a really experienced and really good driver. I think Hulkenberg's one of the most underrated drivers on the grid. But the good thing for Bortoleto being in that Sauber seat is the transition into Audi in 2026. When Audi take over, they're going to be aiming for the top. They've got to be because they're a big brand. If Bortoleto impresses, then I think he will be kept on and will be a long-term driver for them. Hulkenberg is getting into the later stages now of his career as well. He's been in F1 since 2009 or 2010, I think. So it's good for Sauber and Audi to have that balance of a really experienced driver and a younger driver with great potential. I think all Bortoleto's got to do this season is be close to Hulkenberg, maybe beat him a few times, but I don't think they're going to expect him to do that. But as I've said, it's good to see a new South American driver on the grid. I think it's needed in F1. And let's move on to our next driver. So Jack Doohan. Now, Doohan had a really long junior career. He was in F2 since 2022, and in 2024 he spent most of his time on the sidelines as a reserve driver with Alpine and doing a lot of work with the F1 TV lot alongside Laura Winter and Will Buxton. I'll be honest, when Alpine announced Doohan for 2025, I was quite surprised. I didn't think they were actually going to give him a shot. That's more because Alpine very rarely promote their young drivers, and Alpine can be quite a toxic team as well. We've seen in recent years they've gone through more team principals than Humpty Dumpty goes through bandages. They went from being one of the top teams with a really bright future to one of the worst teams on the grid in 2024. They did improve towards the end of 2024 and got that podium in Brazil, and Pierre Gasly was really impressive towards the end of 2024. I think Doohan might have a chance to score some points in the first 3 races anyway, because apparently in his contract he's only guaranteed to race in the first 3 races of the season. Apparently Flavio Briatore is eyeing up Franco Colapinto, which would be a good replacement because Colapinto was impressive in 2024, though in the end he wasn't as good and did have a few crashes and bad moments. By the way, imagine if Alpine do that. They've been so patient with Doohan for the last few seasons, and he's finally been given the opportunity to race in F1 alongside Alpine and Pierre Gasly. And then to just be dropped after the first 3 races would be really harsh. But it is Alpine. They literally didn't let Esteban Ocon drive the final race for the team in 2024 at Abu Dhabi. We even saw on social media he had a special helmet designed to say goodbye to all his engineers and mechanics and team personnel. So do I need to say any more about how toxic Alpine can be? So we've got a lot to look forward to with rookies in 2025. Having 6 rookies on the grid is definitely unusual and quite unique. If you want to see how well I think these rookies will do this season and where they will finish in the championship, click on this video here. Comment down below how well you think these drivers will do this season. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.